It's supposed to be that instead. Well, it was holders is what made it to the baby. It was supposed to have been holsters. Well, for a little humor for our men in the armed forces. Buy bonds. All right, here we go. Let's be serious now. Fooled you. And Kyroot said, self-reference is the blood pressure of secondary systems. There's been a handful of times that we've lately talked about self-reference. It was normally on the basis of humans doing it. It's always it's continual. And it can sound strange until you think about it in your own way. But self-reference, if you take it down to a real personal level and make it plain enough, it can sound as though you're simply attacking run-of-the-mill ego trips that people have. That a man constantly says, I, and somebody, the old joke is that two guys are talking, one says, well, enough about me, let's talk about you. What do you think about me? But all you got to do is listen to humanity. It has nothing to do with ego, and nobody's at fault. Everybody's just doing wonderfully, except those dressed up funny on your roof. I don't go into that. But if you listen to people, it doesn't matter who. If you just listen to people talk, it is a continual, even people that are apparently experts in some field, and they'll start talking about their field of expertise, and it'll almost instantly become anecdotal. That is, they begin to have to make self-reference. Then, to push it a little bit further, Kyroot once or twice of late has thrown in things about religion, and he even let one person one night, in the last few months, even wrote the show, supposedly, and asked something about the self-reference in the show of such things as letters, supposedly to Kyroot, asking about it. You understand, which became kind of mirrors within mirrors. But it just went by, and I don't think anybody asked about it that night. Systems themselves, are you following? If it gets beyond the level that you would think that this could be, if you misinterpret and didn't hear, that it is an attack on ordinary people just going, me, and I, and yes, I'm an expert on so-and-so, let me tell you what happened to me. It's not just that. It is on a collective level, an institutional level. The Kyroot just sort of puts it another way. He refers to it as secondary systems. But we're talking about the full institutional, collective world of life. The Catholic Church, any church, the Democratic Party, France, cannot survive. It would have no blood pressure. Now, it could survive a while because your blood pressure, as all of you should know, can fluctuate. You can get dizzy, a little weak and anemic, and some countries have to lay down for a while. But you can still live, but it is a kind of barometer of one's health, the way it engages in self-reference. It is, Kyroot's been suggesting, as witnessed by him bringing it up, I suggest, that there is something that you can get from it and just immediately get past the point. You've got to see it and simply accept it as the normal, healthy nature of life. Everybody, including you, at the ordinary level, it is almost impossible not to start talking about anything. Somebody can come up and you can believe, you could even be trying that I'm not going to get involved with that, and somebody will walk up and say, oh, what a cute new dog you have. You got a new car. You got a haircut. Whatever happened to so-and-so? Who was that girl that you used to go with? And you can say, well, all right, here's a chance. I will not engage in nouns. I will not engage in self-reference. The person is even asking about something outside of me, a car. And all you got to do, is just be ordinary and let your mind wander off just for a second. And you're not talking about the car, you're talking about you, as you're supposed to if you're ordinary. That is almost child's play. It's unnecessary. Ordinary people won't put up with it. Even if you point it out, they go, well, you're just trying to pick on humanity. It operates on a absolutely all-encompassing level of the institutions of life itself, and I was picking out churches as people would normally think they would be the ones that should be against. They would be standing up against that kind of mindless, egotistical claptrap that people become involved with when they don't watch their tongue, when they don't try to have any intellectual control, and it's not true. were it not for self-reference, the secondary world, in a sense, would eventually expire. That anything, and you could take a cheap shot to start with, and Kyroot, in the last few months, sort of eased up on it. He blamed it on other people, that some guy on the street would say so-and-so, and it started off sort of sounding like that there were these other third-party characters that were chipping away sort of at some of the world's institutions. It's not that. But that's a way to get started, to realize if you took something, a church, a major religion in the world, or a major government in the world, a country itself. But religion seems to be always still the easiest to use as examples, but you could think, rightfully so, that they should be, they in fact claim they are, that they are opposed to unthinking, useless, self-centered kinds of self-reference. Although that might not be their term, they would understand what we were talking about. And you could say, well, they should be, because they have as their goals transcendental areas. They look to higher planes. They're not involved with just trying to build up one individual's ego. I mean, even the Pope. If you say, oh, Mr. Wonderful Pope, or the head of some church, oh, aren't you wonderful? And if he is indeed the head, you know what he's going to do. He's going to drop his head, and paw like a horse and go, oh, I'm not all that great. There's probably been better popes than me, probably. But then you expect the institution itself. You never think about the institution actually being a system. You certainly don't think about being alive, but of course you people, or anybody at the ordinary level, doesn't think about life being alive. And anybody that doesn't want to think about that, of course, turn off your set or turn off your brain. You can leave the set on, but just start thinking about it in an ordinary way. But the parts of anything alive are also alive. And in a sense, all the institutions, the systems that make up the secondary world are alive. But they would not stay alive if they did not engage in what would be, at an individual level, almost egregious forms of egoism. That is, continual self-reference. The church has to say. It has to continually talk about the church, the church, the church, the church, the church. The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, anybody. Anytime there's a line drawn that there's a boundary between France and Germany, France has got to continue to talk about itself. And it's got to watch that Germany don't talk too much about itself. And then France has to look over its shoulder to make sure that Italy hadn't started that same kind of crap again. But they would die if, in a crude sense, if all human systems, not just individual, but at the institutional level, if they were not egomaniacs, they would have no blood pressure. They must continually refer to themselves. May I suggest further, the useful part, once you see what it is for your own, is to understand that after you've referred to yourself once, which I'm sure most of you did at the age somewhere, most of you look fairly, well, except for a couple of you, but most of you look reasonably, so somewhere, 14, 16, 18 months, you finally referred to yourself. Give it up. After that, it's all plagiarism. After that, it's just trying to reinforce a dam that's got nothing behind it. You just don't look over your shoulder. Well, the dam reservoir is empty. Yeah, but don't look. Self-reference, I'll agree, the same way as all the creation stories at the ordinary level. The gods and the cosmic forces always have to say something to get it going. But after that, it's only the ordinary that think, yeah, tell me more, tell me more. They told you enough. You're alive. Yes, but I want to hear the word again. Read to me again from the book of Jeremiah. Read to me again from basket 17-7 of the unauthorized collection of Buddha's works. Yeah, but we read that last week. Yeah, I know, but I want to hear it again. If you don't know what the mind's for, as one of the Kyroot said tonight, people like to get together and say, I don't know, what do you think? Which, if you've never looked at it that way, that's what they're doing at political conventions. That's what they're doing in all religious services. That's what they're doing at every convention in the world. That's what they're doing at most family gatherings. Anywhere this side of, get your thumb out of the gravy and pass it over here. Anything a little more esoteric than that, even amongst families, is really people together going, well, that is, got to remember the preface that people don't really know what to do with the mind beyond what they do now. That is their first moment of self-reference. Give me! When you were a few months old, give me! You got to understand, gimme ends in M-E. Is, gimme after that. After that, it's plagiarism. After that, it's kind of boredom. After that, it's like, to carry the metaphor further to make some of you happy, it's like everybody becomes a Presbyterian. Every time you try to think, you sit down, and you dress up, and you sit down, and you go to sleep, just immediately. That's how you know you're a Presbyterian. That is part of what self-reference does. It is a kind of absolute comfort. It is a kind of stability. It is a kind of rudder. But all systems must refer themselves. Now, the real sticky part, I spent all this time that you can't really talk about, is consider the alternative. Now, it can't happen in life. It's not supposed to. It would be truly, in a sense, suicidal over a long period of time. That self-reference, back to the Kyroot, is the blood pressure of secondary systems. But how about at an individual level? What would be the alternative? Consider all the ramifications. Don't just say, well, the alternative would be you would never refer to yourself. Give the man an IQ button, a genius button. I mean, anybody can say that. But consider the ramifications on your system. That if it were not involved with having to refer to itself, to keep itself alive, which the ordinary systems must, I repeat. An ordinary man's personality is the same thing as any church, any convention, any organization. The local county's bird watching, the old maid's bird watching society. The thing will not hold together unless you're going to count one or two women sitting around 2 or 3 times a year sipping tea and trying to figure out how do you spell Alzheimer's. I can't remember. But if the organization has any life at all, it must refer to itself. They must refer to itself amongst each other. They will even get into printed literature. If they're going to print it all, what will it be? It'll say, official minutes of this month's Little Old Ladies Birdwatching Society. And throughout there will be, and nobody thinks about it, but there will be continual references to the society. That is the blood pressure, is the self-reference. That is, in a sense, what continues to make it feed upon itself, that the secondary world does bootstrap. It just doesn't know it. Somebody who can think knows what's going on. Somebody can think outside the ordinary demands. But what I was going to ask you, don't just say, when I say consider the ramifications, if you personally, in some way, could cease to be dependent for your own health. Not just your health, but what seems to be your own diagnosis of your health. Because you wouldn't think about it this way, but it would be, in essence, like this, if you did it and you go, good God, I just remembered. And then instead of saying something like, I hadn't breathed, I hadn't inhaled in 3 days, it'd be like, I have not engaged in self-reference in 3 days. So don't just say, when I say consider what the alternative, and you say, well, the alternative would be, you'll never refer to myself. Yeah. Consider the operational ramifications, potentially inherent therein. See, and if you don't want to do it, then you can get lost there and say, what the hell does that mean? And Kyroot said, page 10. A rebelliously involved lad asked his dad, in attempting to do this kind of stuff, is there anything that you could think about that is even potentially more useless than thinking about death? And the old man said, well, relationships would run you a close second. Those who are keeping track, there are several connected along those lines, so we'll press on and see if any more pop up. Okay, well, there was a couple, they were separated, but I'll read them. One was asked for. And may I remind you, who may just be tuning in for the first or 24th time, right before this starts, the graphics on the screen point out, amongst other things, the copyright and our address to send us money and all that. But it points out that just because something makes you laugh means it's a joke. So, these two were, even though they were separated, they were connected. One chap traces his cerebral celluloid career thusly. Says he, I began as the horrendous creature from the black basement and worked my way up to the lead end, the horrendous creature from the 3rd floor. Another man, only 2 pages, count them, 2 pages later, another man said he had decided to save himself a whole lot of trouble and time by climbing the tallest building in town, and while he was sweating swatting at passing planes, he was simultaneously roaring out to the crowds, "I am civilization." And Kyroot said, for a rebel's purposes, mental attacks on others are just a non-prohibited form of deadly assault. Deadly as in suicidal, not homicidal. Those of you watching on your TV screens, the reason I'm passing some of these that have been requested is that one way or the other I've either already said something or was going to tie it into something later, or I looked at it and I don't know what the hell it means. You know what would be funny? I was thinking, what if these are all blank pages I'm looking at? Okay, and Kyroot said, if man's attention to important matters could be held for briefer periods, religions could be funnier and shorter. Again, I don't see anything debatable. I don't see anything at all obscure in that. And Kyroot said, speaking of ones that I'd already said, that there was a certain kind of continuing trail running through. Here's another one. And Kyroot said, talk about emotions helps magnify them. If we had all the time in the world, if we just wanted to, we could point out immediately that you could take that at least how many ways? That is, you could take it, that's good, not very original, because all you're saying is, that's the very kinds of things that, such as the confessional in religion, such as interpersonal relationships of spilling your heart and your guts to other people, are professional analysis. That talking about emotions helps magnify them. You could run in all sorts of directions, but mainly you could run in the direction of, well, talking about emotions, for one thing, if we were going to take, right quick, the professional analysis approach, then you could say, well, people who have, quote, emotional problems, to talk about them helps magnify them, will help bring out those that are subconsciously buried, those that have been so traumatizing that one no longer can willfully think about them. Or you could also say, on a more non-professional, everyday, common sense level, what people have said, that, well, talking about emotions does help magnify them. That is, if somebody makes you mad or if somebody dies that you know, and you try to be a real macho type and you don't cry or you don't show any emotion, that kind of thing can make you sick. And so it's good to talk about them. You don't have to go to a psychiatrist, but at least after the funeral or after whatever the great tragedy is, at least sit down with someone that you feel comfortable with and go ahead and say, I can hardly stand this. I don't know what I'm going to do. It helps magnify them. All right. Nothing very original there. How about if you take it in some other non-routine direction? Then it becomes, forget original. I don't know how an ordinary person could equate synonymously insane and original, but consider a more non-conventional use of that idea. That talking about emotions helps magnify them, as opposed to it being a benefit, which the first two the examples I was using, ordinary life, quite properly, looks at them as being advantageous, that you should talk under certain conditions, probably many, many conditions. In fact, probably most conditions. If something emotionally is bothering you, don't hold it in. You know what that'll do, Jesus. I mean, you've either been in analysis or you've seen the Donna Hughes show, you know. You've heard people tell you that you just can't hold in emotions. Talk about them, damn it. What if and don't just take the opposite approach, or you'll be back to playing that chump game that I was playing for you 10 minutes ago. Don't just take the opposite approach, but consider what could be not that approach, that sentence didn't mean that, and yet you could use that idea, that talking about emotions helps magnify them. something other than the examples I pulled out of life of how you should. Either at a professional level, if you are seriously emotionally challenged, or if you're just kind of everyday emotionally challenged and or cannot afford the help of a professional mental health expert, then call your aunt or your mama. But consider the alternative of not doing that. But not just the opposite, but consider it something that was not doing the ordinary, sane, mentally healthy thing to do. And you looked at it, that, all right, same statement, talking about emotions helps magnify them. Well, if I'm going to the trouble to rub your lower lip, then I'll go ahead and say, what if there could be circumstances or people that don't want their goddamn emotions magnified? I don't know. It's your lip. You think about it. It helps if you got a soul patch to play with and go, or a beard. Unless, of course, you're dating your own wife and then you don't need a beard. And Kyroot admitted, if that's the word for it, quote, ordinary thinking will keep you alive about as long as anything else. I guess for those that accidentally turned on the show and was trying to get a way out, here's a good time to leave. Very close to the end. That's a nice place to finish. Of course, it's not really, because out in the ordinary secondary world, dependent upon collective wisdom, institutional growth, progress, stability, then they would tell you that that's not true, and it's not true. Anybody who's a good whatever, Presbyterian, Catholic, back to religion, Muslim, Buddhist, and I'm talking about good. They're a good, solid member of the community. A good Muslim, if you say, all right, look, you seem pretty sharp. Let me tell you the truth. Ordinary thinking, that is, and then you got to, of course, infer to the person, ordinary thinking, are you a Muslim? Are you a believer? Yes. Then that's ordinary thinking for you. Oh yeah, if you want to put it that way. All right, that will keep you about as long as anything else. And if they still didn't get the point, you say, all right, you could be Jewish, and it'd do you just as much good. May I suggest you would probably have less than an absolutely fully cooperative listener on your hands by that point. And you could do it, as you know, between Germans and the French. You could do it between less, perhaps, aggressive level between Whigs and Tories, Royalists and Democrats. But to tell a person who is dependent upon some external form, some allegiance to their religion, their race, their nationality, to tell them ordinary thought, once they get the idea that ordinary thought, with no offense if they could follow it to start with, that ordinary thought is whatever you're thinking. You're thinking that you are an Irish Protestant, a male Irish Protestant, right? That's ordinary thinking for you. That'll keep you alive about as long as anything. Up until then, I guess they'd be all right. Like, well, what's the point? And the point is, hey, you could be a French Catholic. You'd be no worse off. That is not the way life works. And they would not, should not, could not agree. And see, that was sort of the humor, is Kyroot pointing out that all of this, I guess you could listen to it in a certain way and think, well, I'd be a lot better off if I thought in revolutionist terms, if I had the mind of a rebel. But Kyroot pointed out, thinking ordinarily will keep you alive about as long as anything else. I will say I was there when Kyroot wrote that one this afternoon, and there was a potential addendum at the time, and he didn't put it. Because he sat there and I read his mind, and he said, no, some of those people are good enough, but now they'll put in their own. So, don't let me have to go back and tell him that he should be disappointed. A kid asked his old man, has there ever been a love affair, a religion, or a mutual friend that did not mention death? The nature of secondary speech thought, one term, is such that the first thing that the beginnings of any sentence thinks about is how it will end. I guess they could be somebody who listen to some of Kyroots and think that Kyroot has the audacity, the insensitivity to pick on depression, melancholy, poetic chagrin. But there's nothing strange afoot in the secondary world, which amounts to what appears to be a three-dimensional reality operated under finite conditions with a limited amount of energy. Here, the other areas it does not matter. But a limited amount of energy here, like polarized energy running what seems to be a 3D view. When you've got that, there is no choice. The first thing any sentence, any thought starts, it doesn't necessarily put it in these terms, but the first thing it thinks about is how the hell am I going to get out of this? Where does the period come to? And then, at least anybody thinks, at least anyone has taken up the wrong approach, that you too would pick on melancholy, romantic, metaphysical poets. What else are they going to talk about? What seems to be most people, most ordinary thought, what seems to be probably the grand occurrence in their life? Dying. What's the most attention most people are going to get in their life? When they die. When most attention will be paid, more people will speak highly of them. I don't know. And some people finds that, well, that sounds strange. Maybe we shouldn't be like that. Well, you strange person, you. Anybody would think that. It's just as normal as it can be. I guess if you think that Chuck Jones was a philosopher. He was the guy that drew Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck now, I think. Maybe I got too smart for my own good. Isn't that his name? Never mind. Can't be corrected here on TV. Jesus, make me look like an ass. At least I'm not going up the ladder behind somebody else, having to stare into theirs. If I look up and see one, I know whose it was. It's not going to be a stranger's. And Kyroot said, after intellectual maturity is reached, most men's primary pleasure on the train is sitting in seats already well contoured and broken in by previous passengers. It's what's known as, I guess you'd call it, derriere plagiarism. Once you get on the train of life, once you are intellectually mature, that is, Jesus, I got through school, maybe my parents will pay off the damn college loan. I don't want to ever see another textbook. Jesus, I don't want to think about thinking. What do you look for? Well, you could go look for a nice cushioned pew in a Presbyterian church so that as soon as you sit down, everybody wants to go and sit down in a nice place to where you don't have to do anything else. I mean, here you're on the train, you can't seem to get off, and what do people look for? Of course, life makes them say, well, I look for a challenge. They're looking for a comfortable seat. Not just a comfortable seat. If you go up to one that looks like it's never been set in, it's like a theory that you just heard, or it's like ideas that maybe just suddenly flash through your mind, or the train went past the station and you look, and you thought, what the hell did that billboard say? And it's like something you never thought about. Nobody wants to sit there, you know that. Look how hard it is to watch this show, and we're not even on. This is all an illusion. Everybody wants to go and sit down on a place that previous passengers have broken in. It is attractively contoured already. Yeah, that's what people are looking for. And of course, those that really think they're getting high class, they'll look around and say, I would like to find a place to sit that if I look down at the impressions that perhaps a scientist sat there. I'm not going to sit somewhere if I've got any idea that, something like a drywall man or a plumber sat there, or a cab driver. I'm going somewhere, maybe an artist. Because that brings up a new possibility of some kind of new occult art. That, you close your eyes and throw sticks on the ground or something, then look at where people sat and cast their future. I don't know. It's free if you want to use it. A combination. Wait a minute. A combination like some kind of home delivery, occult combination, diviner and pizza delivery. Here's what it is. You bring over the pizza and you get your money, and then you ask them to sit in it, And then you look at the impression they made, and you go, huh? You say things like, I see the initials either E or M. Yeah. And I feel like that somebody has been somewhere and then came back. Well, you could at least, if it takes off, you could send me some kind of little royalty, I guess. And Kyroot said, if there was, or if there is a fountain of youth, it would be in the, quote, compassion for the system. Since it doesn't cost me anything, or you either, for me to make all these rhetorical suggestions, could I suggest that would be what's attempted at a more figurative level in religion? That if you had compassion for the system, but you got to remember all the ways that Kyroot has used system, life itself. You could go all the way, when I say religious, I mean in a small r. Ecologists now, environmentalists, think we should have compassion for the poor planet, that we're going to mistreat it and all that. But what if you had some compassion for every system? You might be talking about, in spite of the fact, in case anybody didn't see a connection there earlier, Kyroot, that point out that ordinary thinking can make you live about as long as anything else. This, if you had ordinary ears, is almost in contradistinction. Of course, it's not. But if there were a fountain of youth, that is, if there was something that might have some impact, some effect over what appear to be the ordinary span of one's life, what if it would be some kind of rejuvenating force, and it would be within not any particular system, not any philosophy or religion, but simply contained within compassion. The full term in quotations from Kyroot was compassion for the system. The is a nice, indefinite, open-ended article. Then you can say, what system? The system. All right, any system. Bye. Good night. Au revoir.